Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Yep, we definitely want to thank Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been a magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today, and don't forget, Bee Culture makes a great Christmas present for the beekeeper in your life. And while you're there, check out Bee Culture's Beekeeping Your First 3 Years, a quarterly magazine for beginning beekeepers. And we definitely want to thank Global Patties for their continued support. Today we have the two Brians from Bees in the D. They created a 501c3 organization in Detroit devoted to honeybee and pollinator education and conservation. They are urban beekeepers, and they will be talking about how they got started, what they do, and some of their experiences along the way. But first, Kim, last podcast you made quite an announcement. So how are the early days of retirement going?
I'll let you know when I finally get some, Jeff. It's been kind of running full speed since day one here. I've been at the office more than not, getting Jerry's up to speed and finishing up some projects. Still got some projects to finish, but you'll notice it's the middle of the day and I'm not anywhere but at home. So it's not as bad as I make it out to be.
That's good. And the fact that you get to go upstairs and work in your office without having to drive anywhere probably makes it better too.
Yeah, I'm still getting the office shaped up. I'm trying to put 33 years worth of stuff into a room that's big enough for about 2. So we'll see what happens, but it's been fun.
Good. Well, I'm excited for you, and then plus it gives us a lot of opportunity to get more podcasts out. So
that's the goal here.
That's the goal. All right. Hey, last podcast you mentioned something about hearing from our listeners, and that made me think, well, we have the ability through our podcasting, the podcast hosting service. While we can't see who is listening to our podcast, we do have a list of all the countries our listeners are coming from or are downloading episodes from. And, you'd be surprised at where we have listeners around the world. Sitting here, we think, well, it's just the United States and United States beekeepers, maybe some Canadians. And, well, no. So, of course, our largest number of listeners are United States, Canada, and Europe. But did you know we are listened to in South America, in Brazil, Ecuador, Argentina, Chile, Suriname? I've never heard of the small country called Suriname. Across the Atlantic, we're heard in Morocco, Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Australia, India, China, Nepal, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Russia, South Korea, and the Ukraine, Moldova, Turkey, Greece. I mean, it'd be easier probably to list the countries where we're not downloaded, like North Korea or someplace. But it's pretty amazing when you look at the beekeepers around the world listen to the podcast. It really kind of gets a perspective on how important the honeybee is to everybody.
I think everybody's probably the right way to put it. I'm kind of amazed at that. I haven't looked at that list. I'm glad that you did, and it kind of makes you sit down and take a breath here because there's a lot of people out there that are actually paying attention to what we have to say. So I guess we better say it right, huh?
Yeah, but make no mistakes, or at least if we do, there's a lot of people who can correct us. But so if you're out there sitting in any country around the world, and the more remote, we'd love to hear from you. In fact, we did hear from last summer we talked to a beekeeper up in Washington State who used to be in the Peace Corps, and he was in Africa, in the western country, and we heard from a beekeeper who's off of, Riker, you're going to kill me because I can't remember where you're working, but Riker is working with the Peace Corps with bees, and it's in the South Pacific somewhere. And I should have looked it up before we started the podcast. But so, we'd love to hear from where people are keeping bees and how they're using the information in the podcast.
How do they do that, Jeff?
Well, they can just reach out to us at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com, and that'll get routed to both Kim and I, and we'd love, like I said, we'll respond, and if we can, we'll mention you on the podcast and what you're doing, or maybe even get you on the show, or if you want, you can send us an audio postcard, and you can just record a little voice memo on your portable phone, on your iPhone or your Google phone, and send us the file and just say, tell us what you're doing. We'd love to hear from you.
That'd be kind of a fun thing to do, to have 6 or 7 people send us a couple, 3 minutes each, 5 minutes each, and just take a trip around the world talking to beekeepers. That's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah. So all it needs is the listeners to respond. So let's do it. Well, speaking about being around the world, Kim, you were just down in Louisiana.
Yes, I was just last weekend, and it was one of those trips that I won't long forget, because I got stuck in an airport on both sides for about 8 hours. Ugh. Because of airplanes being broken. And as you're stuck in an airport, and it's warm and it's dry, and there's food and there's people to watch, and you bring work, so life could be a whole lot worse. And being on a broken airplane at 30,000 feet would be a whole lot worse. So I appreciate airplanes' caution and airports' ability to take care of you when you're there, even if you don't want to be there. But yeah, Louisiana State Beekeepers Association had me down, listened to some good people, Texas A&M researchers talking about some of the work that they're doing that the Louisiana beekeepers helped fund, which is why they were there. They were looking at the ratios of lipids and proteins in artificial bee feed, and finding out some pretty neat things. They haven't published it yet, and I can't talk about it because I don't know enough to talk about it. But listening to them and what they were doing in terms of adjusting the proteins and the lipids, I think we're probably going to see some great improvements in what we're feeding bees. If we can't feed them real food, the stuff we're going to feed them is going to be a lot closer. I also had a talk. There were a few vendors there, and I had some spare time. So, like when I was in April Monday, I spent more time talking to the vendors than I did listening to the speakers, because the speakers are what is, and I'm going to tell you the vendors are what's going to be. Yeah. So talking to them was interesting. We got some people who are still looking at adulterated honey, and they've got a petition out. The Healthy Bees people have a petition out. They're looking for NMR capability at every port to test all the honey that comes in. And I talked to the strong microbials people, and this is bacteria in a honeybee's gut, basically. And I'm beginning to hear some really good things about that in general, and this stuff in particular, in terms of helping bees. So talking to them, I broached the subject of getting them to come on and tell us about it, and they're interested. So hopefully they'll be on pretty soon, and we can ask them some questions about how this is working. And there were some other people there, some vendors, some local vendors, and those are always kind of fun because they're focused right on what's going on in their particular area. And a lot of people are talking about something I don't have here at all. You don't have it either, the Chinese tallow tree and what they're doing to that. Yeah. It's an invasive, and they're trying to get rid of it. And it's a major honey crop down there. So there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth about that coming down the road. But yeah, it was a good time, airports and all.
wonder about invasive species, especially plants, because it seems like once they get established, it's Katie bar the door. You're not going to get ahead of it. I wish.
Yeah, and you got to remember that you and I are an invasive species, and so is our honeybee. So, how far are they going to take this?
That's true. It is crazy. Well, we have a great interview we have lined up for our listeners today, don't we? We talked to the Brian Peterson Roest and his partner Brian Roest Peterson from the Bees in the D.
I'm looking forward to it. I've heard a little bit about the program, and let's go talk.
And just before we get going, I just want to let our listeners know you might notice a bit difference in sound and Kim's voice as we transition into the interview. Kim was wrapping up the tail end of his travels and had to dial this one in on the phone. So you notice a slight difference.
You can phone it in, Jeff.
Yeah, you can phone it in. All right, let's drop into that one right now. Well, welcome, Brians, to the Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Hello, everybody. This is Kim.
Well, guys, you've been doing a lot of good work in the Detroit area. How did Bees in the D get started?
Well, thanks. I'm glad that you're noticing it. We're working hard, but I've been beekeeping for about 11 years, and actually beekeeping came into my life because of the generosity of Garden Club of Rochester, where I happen to teach fifth grade and teach at Oakland University. And they had some funds and wanted to send a teacher up to Beaver Island, where there's a biological center, to take a 2-week crash course through Oakland University called Beekeeping Across the Curriculum. And they were hoping that it would be a teacher that would then bring more knowledge about pollinators and bees back to the classroom. And so when I found out it was free, as a teacher, anything that's free we love. And I love nature. I to be honest with you, I really didn't know much about bees. I was more really into birds and reptiles and wildflowers, but anything that is part of our incredible world and nature, I always love to learn about. So I went up to Beaver Island, and I always tell people I caught the bug. I just fell in love with beekeeping, and just started as a hobbyist with a couple hives when I lived in Lake Orion. And then eventually we moved to the city and decided to start the nonprofit because the bees were kind of there for me. Those that are beekeepers understand it's like almost therapy to go into hives. And it was just a retreat for me to go into the beehives. And so they were there for me. And so when I was reading all the articles about the drops in their populations and the mites and the diseases and all the problems that they were having, I thought, let's start a nonprofit that we can help support pollinators. And that's where Bees in the D came into existence. And we got our name because Brian, of course, got dragged along with me. He's helped with a little bit of beekeeping, but he does the administration side of things. And our friends, once we moved to the city, would always joke that we're going to go see the bees in the D. And that's how we got our name of Bees in the D for our organization. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it all happened.
When you're not keeping bees, you are a school teacher?
Yeah, I teach fifth grade. I'm in my 21st year at Musselman Elementary. And then I also I'm an adjunct professor at Oakland University teaching science for elementary teachers.
Oh, very good. And I read that you actually met a president.
Yeah.
You got an award?
And you know what's crazy about all of that? Like none of it would have happened without the bees. And so that's another area where it's like the bees have opened up so many doors for me. The professor that taught the beekeeping course on Beaver Island through Oakland University nominated me for the presidential award. And I was flattered. I mean, I was shocked that I actually won it. And so I got to be a guest at the White House to meet President Obama, which was life-altering. It was amazing. And like I said, it was all because of the bees. And so yet another reason I wanted to give back and start the nonprofit.
Brian, I got a couple of questions here. What do you do in your spare time?
What spare time?
And the other question I have is, when you were at the White House, did you get a chance to meet Charlie Brantz, the White House beekeeper?
I did not, but I have to tell you, I really wanted to. And I also, when I met President Obama, I said to him, I go, is Michelle around? Because I was really hoping to meet her too, because I know that she was very instrumental in bringing bees to the White House. So I take him that you've met the beekeeper then.
Yes, I've been there several times. I know Charlie, and we've been in the garden, but meeting Charlie would have been good. But what you did was outstanding. I'm very impressed with all of the things that got you there. The Teacher of the Year and all of the rest, all because of bees. There's a lot of people in the world who have been able to do marvelous things because of bees. You're a good example of another person.
Yeah, they're amazing creatures, and the doors that they've opened for us are just mind-blowing. Like with our organization, I really honestly thought that we would have like maybe 1 or 2 locations, 6 hives in the city. And so that's what we did have our first year when we started the nonprofit, and word got out. And then we went to 29 hives the next summer. And one of the locations was Cobo, now TCF Center. And I think once people saw that and the beautiful pictures on their green roof with our hives, we then blossomed into 102 the next summer. And now we're up to 160 hives at 52 different locations. So it's been a real whirlwind, and I couldn't have done it without all of our incredible volunteers and our board members. And of course, Brian.
Brian, how many volunteers do you have working with you to take care of that many hives?
Well, we have our 10 board members, but I don't really have a number on volunteers because it's like a pool of volunteers that we're able to pull from.
Okay.
It's really nice. We have a volunteer workshop that's coming up just because we're getting such an amazing response, which is so amazing for the bee population. People are loving to help the bees. And so we have a big workshop coming up to help organize where our volunteers feel they have their strengths, whether it's at events, whether it's beekeeping, and that's coming up on the 22nd of February.
Well, I guess the question would be then, if I wanted to be a volunteer with you in the Detroit area, are you looking for more people? And if you are, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, we are always looking for volunteers, especially, to be honest with you, in the beekeeping area, just because with beekeeping, obviously, there comes some skills that, it just takes a little more practice, of knowing how to work with bees. We do some workshops to help, but if there are beekeepers that already have experience that would love to be a part of it, they can just email us at our website. Our website's beesandthedee.com, or they can email us at bees@beesandthedee.com.
And we'll have those links in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you. You
have many different locations where you're keeping bees, and I assume you have 1 or 2 colonies per location, sometimes more. How do you find your locations, and what kind of agreements do you have with both the communities, the cities, and the property owners for those bees on that property?
I'm going to let Brian share a little bit more about that because, like I said, he does a lot of that end. So,
So since we started with the Cobo site, we had 4 hives there. And then just businesses reached out to us. A lot of them have green initiatives and want to get different certifications. So beekeeping just seems like a natural fit for them. We work with some really great partners, GM Ford Chrysler, Quicken Loans, Shinola, a lot of automaker, different distributors, schools. We work with parks. So we've got a whole bunch of different locations and different types of partnerships. And as far as like locations, we're at 52 locations spread across 6 counties. And we just have different agreements with them, depending on like who wants to have the honey, And, if it's just something that we're just tending to the bees for them. So it just varies on the partnership.
And I want to add on to that some of our sites like Michigan Urban Farming Initiative or Detroit Abloom, we are in a lot of urban gardens at the MGM Casino with Black Pearl Gardens. And what I love about those sites is there's a lot of scientific articles and proof that you have bees within, the range of gardens, your produce is, going to be a lot stronger. And we have a lot of letters that attest to that from Green of Detroit and Gardens. And I love that because a lot of that food goes back to the community. And so it's great that we get to be a part of some of the food deserts that exist here in the city and helping people have fresh organic food thanks to the hard work of all the bees in the hives.
You have bees at several locations, hotels, the Shinola Hotel. There, you mentioned a couple others.
Yeah, Foundation Hotel, the Henry in Dearborn.
Mm-hmm. Are those restaurants in those hotels using the honey in any of the food preparations?
Yeah, they actually are. They do get the honey and they use it either in the kitchen or at the bar. Honey is great in cocktails. And with that said, we also have hives at like the Eastern Market Brewery. Right now, they have a beer on tap called the Bee's Knees. And we just did our release at Detroit City Distillery Friday night, sold out in 90 minutes we took 30 gallons of honey and put it into a bourbon barrel, let it age for a few months, and then put bourbon back in the barrel. And we had our big release party at their tasting room on Friday and literally sold out of all of our honey bourbon and the bourbon honey in 90 minutes. It was unbelievable. Wow.
So how do I get in line for a bottle of that honey?
Well, you'll probably need to stand in line next year.
Although I will tease this, we of course we kept a few bottles of both, and we have our annual BBQ. It's our fundraiser, usually in May or June, where we have a silent and a live auction to raise money to put more hives throughout, the city or the outskirts of the city. And so we kept a few to make sure that they're in the auction. So
you'll see them popping up at events every now and then. So make sure you get to some of our events.
Well, probably see them out on eBay, someone trying to make some money on they would.
That's
right.
So funny you say that. There was a couple people there that, unfortunately, if you didn't get there early, you didn't get any, and people were offering to sell their bottle for twice the amount to people that came a little bit later. It was quite funny.
Well, one of the things you'll have to do is keep us updated on when that auction is. We do kind of go back and visit with people we've talked to before. So keep us informed, okay?
Yeah, we would love that because this will be our 4th annual BBQ, right? Mm-hmm. And it is a really, really fun event.
So last year, New York Times named Detroit one of the nation's most exciting cities, and Lonely Planet named Detroit as one of the top spots to visit, second only to Spain. I think that's pretty impressive for Detroit. How do you see bees and the fitting into the city's future?
Well, it's amazing the amount of sustainability groups and the companies that have sustainability programs. But what makes Detroit, I think, so unique for beekeeping is that there is so much green space because of all the vacant lots and gardens. And Detroit is like a big, small city. And what I mean by that is we're very connected. And so getting to work with like Bedrock, who does a lot of the landscaping throughout downtown, we've gotten to sit down with them and talk about plants to put in the potters or in the median that are more pollinator friendly. And so I really see it becoming a leader in urban gardens, in beekeeping. And we've already have had quite a few groups from really all over the country, the world even that have come, and we've given hive tours in our beehives, especially up on Cobo's roof, because it's just well, I keep saying Cobo, but it's TCF roof. It's such a beautiful setting to have the skyline in the background, the river on one side. It's just in the green roof. It's amazing. And so we get quite a few requests from people from really all over the world, but mainly throughout our nation that have heard about it. And we actually work with the Honeybee Conservancy in New York City. We've developed a partnership with them. And I've gotten to go out to Central Park at the Arsenal building, the historical Arsenal building, and share about beekeeping in Detroit. It was like another bucket list thing where I got to share about what we're doing here in the city in New York, which was really fun. But yeah, I really see Detroit becoming quite a leader in urban beekeeping.
And to add to that, we have a lot of high profile locations, with the Shinola Hotel being, rated one of the best hotels, of course, being on TCF Center. You can literally see our rooftop beehives, throughout the city from other buildings, which is pretty cool. We're at the Rensen. So having these like high profile places, stirs up conversation and like, oh, what's that? Or did you see that beekeeper over there? It's just, kind of bringing light to beekeeping and bringing it on the forefront, putting in people's minds and, having discussions about the importance of bees is, kind of really what we're all about.
I would think it would be pretty interesting to walk through the lobby of the Shinola with a wheel cart with honey supers on it, or package bees, and walking through the lobby and getting on the elevator and say, top floor, please. And then having this package of bees underneath your arms.
The funny you bring up bringing the bees to Shinola Hotel. The day that we did that, Jennifer Lopez was actually in town touring and she was being there. So we had to go up the stairwell. We couldn't take the elevator past her floor. And so we had to wait in the stairwell with our nukes of bees, until she had gotten settled in. And we're sitting there with, engineering, just kind of laughing at, the thousands of bees that, are on the other side of the door. After a short period of time, we actually got to get up to the roof and, which was great, but it was kind of fun.
It's like we do, like when I go and beekeep, I think I spend more time talking to people before and after, because they all, because of course I have my bee, veil or jacket on, or they see something and they ask questions, and it spurs the most amazing conversations. And so I get to educate, even when I'm out and about. So it is kind of funny as you're pushing a nuke with, 10,000 bees through a hotel and people are like, what's in the box? It's
right. One of the Quicken buildings, Bedrock buildings, we have 6 hives. And so we've got a flatbed cart with all of the beekeeping equipment, the hives, and, the employees are just kind of like, what's going on? It's just real interesting.
I imagine it wouldn't actually, I'm not going to disclose locations or names, but it wouldn't be the first time a bunch of bees escaped in a large scale hotel. So if it ever happens.
Okay. So we saw,
there is a precedent.
Yeah. We saw advertised the other day and we were like, oh, we should have, because we've been doing it. I order the laundry bags, from that kids have for college to put the nukes in, so that if some bees do escape, they're entrapped in those laundry bags. Well, I saw it advertised at a bee company the other day, nuke bags. And I was like, wait a second. I was doing that with the laundry bags.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Interesting you should mention that. I was at a meeting this weekend in Louisiana, and there is a business in Louisiana that makes that bag. It's a net bag that you can essentially tie shut, and it is bee proof. And you may be interested in looking at some of those, because the person that makes them guaranteed that bees will not get out. And it sounds like some of the places you go, that would be a good thing to be able to tell people that you're walking by. Well, that kind of brings up another question, just a fundamental beekeeping question. What's your honey crop? What are your bees foraging on there?
So I am assuming you're asking about in the city.
Correct.
Yeah. You know what? We really label our honey, or when people ask, what kind of honey is this? Because, people know of clover honey and lavender honey. It's just wildflower honey because, like I said, the wildflowers that are growing in vacant lots, or I guess you can even say weeds, but, that's a rather generic term. And like I said, we work with a lot of the businesses to plant accordingly. And there are a lot of gardens. But then again, the bees do go, a 3 to 5 radius. So what's fun about Detroit is they're also international bees because they're going across the river over into Windsor. And so therefore, I'm going to tell you, our hives, what's fun about our organization is we get to compare being in the suburbs, being in a more rural area, and being in the urban area. Our urban hives produce probably one of the best of all, even out of the rural areas, which kind of surprised me. But then again, it didn't with how much green space there is. Whenever we place hives, we always look at the satellite picture to see how much green space there is. We're looking for a water source that's nearby for the bees because we want to make sure that we give them the best possible location, because that's one of our main goals. I mean, we have 2 pillars to our organization. It's conservation and it's education. So we want to do what's best for the bees. And the honey, we're not really in the honey business, but we're fortunate enough that they're producing rather well that we can then sell that to help with our mission of education and conservation.
Well, speaking of which, talk a little bit about the Bees and D Education Center that you have planned.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. We're so excited about this. We actually later today have a bee tea. We're having tea with some people that are very interested in the education center as well. So this was a part of our board's 10-year goal or plan last year. And Studio Detroit, which is an incredible architecture firm here in the city, heard about what we were thinking of doing through one of our board members and just ran with it and designed blueprints after talking with us what we were thinking of doing. And pro bono created the blueprints for us using 2 shipping containers to upcycle them. And it will have a living roof and bees on the roof. And we want it to be more than just, we want it to be a community education center. And so we're currently working with the Land Bank of Detroit and finding the best location. And our fundraising has already begun. And we have been fortunate enough that we've already received some very generous donations. And so hopefully next year we'll be breaking ground. So we're really excited about that, because to have a central location to do our beekeeping classes and to give tours and to then allow some of the cut flower gardens and other nonprofits and small businesses that need a space to work to provide that for them will just be amazing.
When you look at your operation, you have 52 locations, over 160 colonies. Where do you store and you have a board, but where do you store everything and how do you figure that out? Where do you extract everything and bottle it?
Yeah. Well, that's part of the education.
Logistically, it sounds like quite a challenge at times.
Yeah. It's just kind of learning as we go. We're fortunate that we currently live in a loft building, so we have ample storage in the basement here, but a lot of the equipment that we do try to keep nearby. We have a location in Plymouth, Michigan, which kind of houses equipment for our western and suburb locations, and then we have a board member that's got ample amount of storage as well at her home. So as far as the woodenware and things, we've got that at a couple different locations, and the educational center will be kind of our downtown hub so that Brian and I can have our house back.
Our guest bedroom is not so much a guest bedroom right now.
unless you're bees, of course.
Now that you have a couple years in and looking at what you've accomplished and the challenges that you've faced and overcome, What would you recommend, and what would be your advice for other organizations looking at modeling bees in a D? And
it's interesting you bring that up, because we've been approached by pretty much people all over the U.S. asking, hey,
I bet.
Start doing what you're doing. And, of course, it's always do a lot of research, ask about ordinances, talk to your neighbors, look into, where you're going to put the hives, kind of see, obviously what's best for the bees, but kind of also what's best for the community and for the, the location that you're going to place them. Because you want to make sure that where you're placing them, it's going to be something that the hives can obviously stay at long term. Just do your homework. We were fortunate enough to find an insurance company that covers us at other people's locations, as opposed to just I'm a single beekeeper and I've got my apiary in one spot. We're dealing with 50 different locations, so that's an important step. And we just want to do what's best for the bees, want to do what's best for the people that come to visit the bees. We always promote safety, and as most beekeepers know, that a head-to-toe beekeeping suit with gloves and all of that isn't always necessary, when you're dealing with your familiar bees. But whenever we do photo ops or things with the media, we make sure that everybody is suited up from head to toe, just because we want to to show that you do have to be there are precautions that you need to take when dealing with bees. And we don't want kids to just walk up and be like, oh, I saw these two guys in Detroit and they're just opening up hives and t-shirts and shorts. So we want to make sure that people are aware of the safety that's required for beekeeping as well.
And I want to also add that Brian's being very modest, because he does all of the contracts with the businesses and deals with the insurance company. And if somebody's looking into doing this with other organizations, especially larger organizations, there is a lot of red tape, and rightfully so. And so it can be challenging at times. And that's, we had to, for that reason, we have to have the insurance. And we laugh that we have workman's comp because we're required to have it, and nobody works for us. We're all volunteers. So there's, you really just need to do your homework, like Brian said, and make sure that you are, following
your T's and dotting your I's.
Yeah, and staying within guidelines that are there at that community or that business.
Well, that kind of brings up the challenge. You mentioned a challenge, and often I've been dealing with urban beekeepers for decades here, and kind of over the years, the biggest challenge to having bees in the city is 2 13-year-olds, and I dare you. And have you run into any of that?
We've been really fortunate that we haven't. We do, we're strategic in how we place the hives. And placing them up on rooftops, or obviously less access. But we have locations where we've, put fencing structures around them. Oddly enough, we did have an incident, was it last year, where someone had a automobile accident in the street, and there was some kind of communication between the two drivers, and one got back in their car and floored it to flee the scene, and ran through a fence, and then ran through the second fence that had 4 hives in it, and basically took out the 4 hives that we had. This happened in the middle of the night. And
surprise.
And it was just a freak accident, so to say. But, it's just, you never know what could happen. So you always just want to make sure that you do, what's right, and, make sure that everything's kind of in a way that, everybody is protected and the bees are protected.
And I love that we have beehives like right in locations that are right, like on the DeQuinder Cut, which is a highly trafficked area. They are within a fence, and we do have some signage to both educate and, to let them know there's bees there. I've had no issues. If anything, it allows more conversation to talk about the difference between bees and wasps and, insects that tend to be a little bit more aggressive, like the hornets and wasps. Because, we have found that many people a bee is a bee in their mind. And most of the time, like at the orchards, when they're enjoying their cider and donuts, they're saying the bees are so bad. Well, those are yellow jackets, which are wasps. And so I love that opportunity to just share that and to talk more about how honeybees really are kind of, they're like horses with blinders on. I mean, they have a mission. And so they're pretty focused on getting to the flowers and doing what they need to do, and very docile creatures. And so, yeah, we have been fortunate that we have not run into that problem.
I guess I'll say you are fortunate because it is often it is something that I caution people who put bees in town is to do exactly what you've done, is making sure that they're either very visible, inaccessible, or they're protected from even car accidents. That the car had to go through 2 fences to get to your bees is kind of amazing. So
yeah, I was amazed that the car could even run.
Right. After seeing, the destruction, it was quite shocking that the car even made it on.
Did the driver get stung? I mean, was anyone stung in that incident, or is that
not that we're aware of?
Smashed equipment.
We work very closely with the local police department. We were on the phone with them right away, explaining some safety measures. And one of the officers was really great. He's like, yeah, I've really been interested in getting into beekeeping, and this is really cool.
And he's now a board member.
Yeah, right.
Both cars fled the scene, so we didn't even get to. They never were able to talk to either of the drivers. There was just a witness that saw it all happen. Mm-hmm. But I also need to give a shout out to Detroit and its residents and the community, because they have embraced us so much that we also have so many watchful eyes out there. People that have adjacent property love having the hives there, and, they're keeping an eye out. So like when that accident happened, one of the neighbors, we were out having dinner with some friends, and a neighbor called me right away and said, you need to get out here. And so it's fantastic that how supportive Detroit has been to our organization, and not just, monetarily, they've been, very giving as well, but just the watchful eyes and the kind words and the support.
It sounds like they've sort of embraced this project, which has got to make things a whole lot easier for you. And going forward, is going to be opening up a lot more doors.
And, you were talking about when you talk to people, I think, a lot of that is credit to our organization and board, because like you said, we are upfront and open. We communicate with adjacent properties. We're not trying to hide something here. We are trying to educate and make them aware. And so communication is so important. And a lot of times we'll suit up the adjacent property owners or the neighbors and bring them into the hive so they can experience it and see. And I mean, that is a game changer right there. When people get to go into the hives, they're like, this is it? Why are they not like attacking us? And they realize that this is not like the Alfred Hitchcock horror scenes that you might see.
That's great strategy, and for all beekeepers, actually.
Even we'll take the employees of the businesses that we place the hives at. We'll get them suited up, because it gives them kind of a sense of pride. You've got the team members that are like, we've got bees, it's so cool, and they'll be talking about it with their customers, and it's just bringing more awareness. And so we try to get as many people involved in the whole operation as possible.
And the liquid gold is nice as well. Everybody loves a little liquid gold.
Sweetens the deal, as they say.
It sure does.
Well, I was going to say that getting him involved in the hives and then sharing a little bit of the harvest later in the year is usually what seals the deal. And with almost any neighbor, even those that are really cautious and concerned, but
A jar of honey goes a long way.
Oh, it sure does.
You're so right.
Yep.
Well, it shows the importance of. We were talking before we started recording the public relations work that you do, the videos that are online, the communication that you are stating is so important, is so well done. I was impressed by all of that you've put out there to communicate the importance of bees in the D and the good that you're doing in the community. Kudos to Brian. I guess you're saying Brian does all the technical stuff in the background, or whoever on your board is doing and pushing all the PR. That's great.
We do have a couple of board members that do work on some of our social media facts, and Brian, of course, with his Forager Fridays, has been a real big hit with teachers and just our following. But it's really cool to see kind of how organically this has grown. We as a organization just hit the ground running with the social media, and we never expected, the following that we have, which is really, really, really wonderful.
I love doing because I love plants, the Forager Fridays, and that was just something I wanted to do. And it's amazing what you can do with an iPhone and a little tripod. And so I just said I'll be driving down the road and I'll be like, oh my gosh, there's a patch of trefoil or whatever. I got to stop. And people probably wonder what in the world I'm doing, but I'll go out there and I'll do a short little video and share about why this plant's important to pollinators. And so that's really fun for me. Like, I love doing that.
And where do you post the Forager Friday?
Either on Instagram or on our Facebook page of it's just under Bees in the D, but I think Brian's uploading them to our website as well.
Yeah, one of my honeydew lists is to get them all onto the website.
Oh, nice.
And then I was getting such a reaction from that. I started doing the National Foods Day. So like just the other day, it was Eat a Cranberry Day. And so I did a video about cranberries and how they need cross-pollination and how our bees fit into that whole scenario with cranberries. And so Brian's probably like, slow it down. I got to get these on the webpage, but they can be found on our social media. I have 2 folders in Facebook, especially. One's called Forager Friday and one is called National Days. And then I actually have a third one that's in and around the hive, because we get so many questions about what do the bees do in the winter? What does it look? Why are the bees all doing this beard thing out front? So I try to do videos about some of the different, aspects of beekeeping that people are curious about. We started an initiative called the Detroit Bee Highway, or the Bee Highway. And it's not necessarily that we do have hives along the highway at Borg Warner, right on 75, Mahindra, right on 59. But it's more about the highway for the bees. And I talk about the 3 essentials: water, food, and shelter. And so we have a map on our webpage where we put where our hives are. But I tell people, even if you are not into getting bee hives, you can help with beekeepers and our pollinators by, taking a 3x3 plot in your backyard. If it's grass, just cut it out, put some wildflowers, or put out a bowl with water and some rocks in it, so that our pollinators have a place to stop, a place to forage, to strengthen them. And of course, I talk about, using more natural things to, for your yards, avoiding pesticides and fungicides and things like that.
And don't mow the dandelions.
Exactly. Let it grow a little longer. And then there's all this big kick right now, which people love, about not cleaning up your yard too much in the fall. Leave some of those leaves and sticks for the native pollinators, that could be in those leaves and sticks that are rusting out the winter.
Well, Brian Peterson Roest and Brian Roest Peterson, we really appreciate you being on the show today to talk about Bees in the D and all the wonderful work you're doing in Detroit. I want to encourage you to send us an audio postcard on an occasion to let us know what you're doing. It's a little feature we do on the podcast where past guests will send us just a voice memo from their cell phone, their iPhone or Google phone, and just kind of give us a 2 to 3 to 4 minute update of their current events and things that have happened since they've been on the show. It works out pretty nicely.
Yeah, that's
So-
Especially when that auction's coming up.
Yeah, we'd love to give you an update on our education center as as it progresses.
Please do.
Wow.
Please do. We'd love to have you back and maybe even Kim's just right around the corner from you, down the road. Maybe even be on site when you open up your education center. That would be fun. Heck, I could even be into town for that. I have family there, so.
And I do want to also encourage people out there just to support their local beekeepers, buy local honey. It takes all of us to help with some of these issues that are happening, and there are so many amazing beekeepers out there. And if you're interested in beekeeping, definitely join beekeeping groups. I know in Michigan we have the MBA, and we're a part of SIMBA here, the Southeast Michigan Bee Association. To be able to network with other beekeepers is amazing.
We'll leave it at that. Thanks a lot, Brian's.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. It's been a good time.
Yeah, likewise.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I really enjoyed talking to the Bryans. They have a great program going on there in Detroit.
Yeah, a couple of things stuck out. One is sort of like you and I. They've got a good division of labor going. They've got the techie guy and they've got the bee guy, and that's kind of what we've got here is a techie guy and a bee guy. But what I really found interesting, and I'm going to guess they have a lot more to share that we didn't get to, were their experiences in urban beekeeping, and the more people hear about how you handle those sorts of things, how you can prepare for accidents or prepare for emergencies and what to do when one happens, the better off you're going to be. So if nothing else, they've done that quite well. And then, of course, working with the local authorities and the businesses that they've got, I thought was good. And if you're thinking of doing this, I've worked with people in Washington, D.C. and in Minneapolis, restaurants that have bees on the roof and they use the honey in their menus and things. It seems like they've done the same thing here, and the business takes pride in what they're doing. The people enjoy the product that they're producing. The people that are keeping the bees are benefiting from it. It's kind of a win-win-win.
Yeah, I agree. I was really impressed with the efforts that they went through and working with the property owners, and the type of property owners they had, including the Ford factories, the GM factories, the Shinola Hotel. The story of them going through the hotels with the cart full of bees and bee equipment. I mean, and invited back. So the fact that they're doing all this and keeping everyone happy is exciting. And working with the local authorities when they had that accident when someone drove into their apiary and took out some hives.
And 2 fences.
Yeah, 2 fences, and yet they're still there and they're able to work with that catastrophe. So I think I give them a lot of kudos for getting the job done and being so proactive and active in the community.
As their education center gets closer to being a reality, we'll have to get them back on and see how it's going.
Well, I think that'll give me a good reason to come back to Northern Ohio, and maybe you and I can make a road trip and do a podcast right on side.
Yeah, Detroit's pretty close. That's a good idea.
It's a good idea. We can stop at Cedar Point on the way back. All right. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. We want to thank this week's sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And while you're there, give them a shout out for sponsoring this great program. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you, from no matter where you are around the world. We want to hear from you. Anything else, Kim?
No, I think that about wraps it up. 24 hours in an airport and a trip through downtown Detroit. I think that's a pretty good day.
Real good day. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.